It was just another Monday morning at Lincoln High School. The bell had rung not too long ago, and the halls were buzzing with students heading to class. Lockers slammed shut, sneakers squeaked on the tiled floors, and backpacks thumped against shoulders. In one of the classrooms, a teenager sat quietly by the window. He wasn't loud, didn't try to stand out. He kept his head down, focused on his notebook, drawing lines and circles absent-mindedly while waiting for the teacher to start the lesson. He liked school, not because it was easy, but because it gave him something to hold on to, a place where he could learn, grow, maybe even dream a little bigger. But not everyone saw him that way. There was another guy in the room, already making noise before the teacher even walked in. Big build, loud laugh, always surrounded by friends. He didn't need to say much to get attention. He just showed up and people noticed. That was how things worked around here. The teacher came in, asked everyone to settle down, and started the lesson. But from the back of the room, the big guy leaned forward and tapped the quiet teen on the shoulder. "Hey," he said, smirking. "You copy my homework yet?" The quiet teen shook his head. "Didn't ask for it." That got a chuckle from some of the others nearby. "Whatever, man," the big guy said, shaking his head. "I bet you wouldn't even know what to do with a real test if it hit you in the face." A few more laughs. The quiet teen ignored it. He'd learned that sometimes silence was the best answer. Talking back only made things worse. So he stayed quiet, kept his eyes on the board and tried to focus, but the big guy wasn't done. He threw a crumpled piece of paper at the quiet teen's head. It bounced off and landed on the floor. The class laughed again. "You scared or something?" the big guy asked, louder this time. "That why you don't talk?" Still, the quiet teen didn't respond. The teacher glanced over, caught the vibe, and gave a warning look. "Let's keep it focused in here." That shut it up for now. But outside of class, things weren't better. In the hallway after the bell rang, the big guy brushed past the quiet teen hard enough to knock his books out of his hand. "Oops," he said, without looking back. The quiet teen bent down, picked them up one by one. Some pages fell open, showing neat handwriting, underlined quotes, short poems scribbled in the margins. Someone else might have seen talent there, or heart, or just a kid trying to find his place. But not the big guy. Over the next few weeks, it became normal. A shove here, a comment there, a name whispered when the teacher wasn't looking. It wasn't physical, at first, just enough to make the quiet teen feel small. Like he didn't belong, and every time he stayed quiet. Some teachers noticed. They'd give the big guy a stern look, maybe tell him to knock it off, but nothing ever stuck. Nothing changed. So the quiet teen kept walking the same path, through the hallways, through the whispers, through the weight of being different in a place that didn't always accept it. He started sitting alone at lunch, started avoiding certain classes, started doubting whether school was still the safe place he thought it was. At home, he didn't talk about it much. His parents were proud of him, always told him he could be anything he wanted. But how do you explain that someone is slowly making you feel like less? One day during a group project, the big guy ended up in the same group. "Great," he muttered, pulling out a chair across from the quiet teen. "Guess I'm stuck with you." No one argued. No one moved. They tried to work, together, but the big guy barely lifted a finger. When the quiet teen suggested splitting tasks evenly, the big guy rolled his eyes. "I don't need your help," he said. "But I guess you need mine." More jokes. More laughter from the others. The quiet teen looked down at the table, jaw, tight fists clenched under the desk. This time he almost said something, almost stood up, but he didn't. Not yet. Then one afternoon in front of the whole class, everything changed. The big guy knocked the quiet teen's notebook off the table. Papers scattered. That time the quiet teen stood up. "You done?" he asked, voice low but steady. The big guy smirked. "What you gonna do about it?" The room went quiet. Before anyone could react, the big guy swung, punch right to the face. A gasp filled the room. The quiet teen stumbled back, holding his lip. Blood trickled through his fingers. Everyone froze. Some pulled out phones. Others stared in shock. The big guy looked around, breathing hard. Then realizing what he'd done, took a step back, but the quiet teen wiped his lip, looked up, and instead of yelling, instead of fighting, he said something no one expected. "Is this all you've got?" His voice wasn't angry. It was tired and strong, like he finally saw something he hadn't before. And maybe, just maybe, so did everyone else. The classroom was still after the punch. No one moved at first. Some stared, some looked away. A few whispered under their breath. The teacher rushed in moments later, drawn by the silence more than any noise. Blood had dried on the quiet teen's lip. His eyes were red, not just from pain but something deeper. Like something inside him had shifted. The big guy stood there, breathing hard, hand sore, face pale. He didn't expect it to go that far, not like this. "Both of you," the teacher said, voice shaking with anger. "My office now." They walked down the hall slowly, side by side but miles apart. One trying to hold back tears, the other trying to hide guilt. Inside the office, the principal sat behind his desk, arms crossed. He listened as the teacher explained what happened. Then he turned to the big guy. "Tell me what went through your head." "I don't know," he mumbled. "He just got on my nerves." "And that gives you the right to hit him?" No answer. Then the principal looked at the quiet teen. "You okay?" He nodded, not looking up. "Did you want to fight back?" "No," he said quietly. "I just wanted it to stop." That moment stayed with everyone who heard it. Later that day, the big guy got a warning. Nothing serious, just a slap on the wrist, a week of detention maybe. But the quiet teen, he got suspended. School policy, they told him. Fighting is against the rules, even if he didn't throw a punch, even if he didn't start it. His parents were confused, upset. They tried to argue, but the school wouldn't budge. "Just come back next week," they said. "Things will calm down." But things didn't calm down. Outside of school, word started spreading. Some students talked about it online, not the fight itself, but what the quiet teen said afterward. "Is this all you've got?" It stuck with people. Some thought it was weak. Others thought it was brave. Back home, the quiet teen sat on his bed, notebook open, pen in hand. He didn't write for school. He wrote for himself. He started writing about how it felt to be seen as less, to be pushed around, to be afraid of walking down a hallway like it was a battlefield. He wrote about the way people looked when it happened, how no one stepped in, how the world kept moving even though his had stopped. And he wrote about strength, not the kind you see, but the kind you feel. He read it out loud once just to hear how it sounded. His voice cracked at first, then grew louder, like he was finally saying what he'd been holding in for too long. A few days later, he showed the poem to a friend. "Can you put it online?" he asked. Just anonymously. His friend agreed, and something strange happened. It started small, a few shares, a couple comments, but soon more people saw it. Teachers read it in class, students shared it with each other. Even some parents talked about it at dinner tables. It wasn't angry, it wasn't violent, it was honest, and that made it powerful. One line stuck out, more than the others. "You can try to break me, but I'm already whole." People started asking who wrote it. Some guessed names. Others just said, "Whoever wrote this." They're speaking for all of us. Meanwhile, the quiet teen came back to school. He expected stares, he expected silence. What he didn't expect was how some people looked at him differently now. Not with pity, not with fear, with respect. Even some of the kids who used to laugh at him before now gave him a nod, or said hey without sarcasm, but not everyone. In the halls, the big guy watched from a distance. He didn't say anything, didn't try to start anything. But every time the quiet teen passed, he looked away, like he couldn't face what he'd done. The quiet teen noticed. And for the first time, he didn't feel scared. He felt something else. Not revenge, not hate, just peace. Like he finally found his voice, and it was louder than any punch. It wasn't just students who were talking about it now. Teachers started reading it out loud in class. Counselors used it during group sessions. Some even printed it out and pinned it on bulletin boards with the heading, Voices matter. People didn't know who wrote it, but it didn't matter. It was something everyone could feel. At school, the quiet teen noticed small changes. Some teachers started checking in with him more often, not because he asked them to, but because they saw something in him, something strong, even if it had been hidden for a long time. Other students began speaking up too. One girl shared her own story of being teased for how she dressed. Another boy talked about how hard it was to ask for help when things got rough at home. It was like the poem opened a door that had been locked for years. But not everything changed overnight. There were still looks, still whispers, still moments when the quiet teen felt like he didn't quite belong. And then there was the big guy. He didn't say much after the fight, didn't try to start anything again. But sometimes in the hallway or during lunch, their eyes would meet for a second, and the quiet teen could see something behind the big guy's stare. Not anger, not pride, something else. Maybe regret. 1. Day after class, the principal made an announcement over the speaker system. We will be holding a special school event next week, a diversity and unity assembly. All students are required to attend. No one really knew what that meant at first. Just another school meeting, another boring talk. But as the days passed, posters went up around campus. The theme was clear. Every voice has a story. Students were invited to share poems, music, art, anything that showed who they really were. The quiet teen didn't plan on speaking. He thought his poem had already said enough. But then his teacher came to him. You should read it again, she said. Out loud, in front of everyone. He shook his head. I don't think I can do that. She smiled gently. You already did once, and people listened. Now imagine doing it again with everyone listening. He didn't answer right away. But later that night, he sat at his desk, notebook open, pen in hand. He stared at the poem. Then he closed the notebook and opened a new one. The day of the assembly came fast. The gym was packed, rows of chairs filled, with students, teachers, even some parents. A small stage stood at the front with a microphone in the center. The quiet teen sat near the back, heart pounding. He hadn't told anyone he'd decided to speak until the last minute. When the host called his name, the room fell silent. A few people looked confused. Others leaned forward, trying to remember where they'd heard the poem before. He walked up slowly, hands shaking but face calm. He reached the mic, took a breath, and began. His voice was soft at first, barely above a whisper. But as he read, it grew stronger. Each line carried weight. Each word hit harder than the last. He spoke about fear, about silence, about the times he wished he could disappear into the walls. He spoke about being different, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't change who he was. And he spoke about strength, not the kind you see in movies, but the kind that comes from standing up when no one expects you to. When he finished, there was a pause. Then slowly someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole room was on its feet. Applause filled the gym. Some wiped their eyes. Others hugged each other. Even the big guy stood up. He didn't clap at first. He just watched. Then, quietly, he joined in. After the event, the quiet teen stepped outside for air. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the school grounds. Behind him, footsteps approached. He turned. It was the big guy. They stood there for a moment, saying nothing. Then the big guy cleared his throat. I'm sorry, he said, for everything. The quiet teen nodded. Thanks. I didn't get it before, the big guy continued. Why you didn't fight back, why you didn't yell. I thought it meant you were weak, he looked down. But now I see it took more strength than I ever had. The quiet teen didn't respond right away. He just looked at the guy standing in front of him. Not as an enemy, not as someone to fear, just someone who was finally seeing. I didn't do it to prove a point, he said. I just wanted to be seen for who I really am. The big guy swallowed hard. I think we all want that, he said. They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands. But something changed between them. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, more students started sharing their stories. Some wrote poems, others played songs. A few painted pictures and hung them on the walls. The school set up a corner in the library called the Voice Booth, a space where anyone could record a message, read a poem, or just talk about how they were feeling. It became a safe place. The Quiet Teen started helping organize it. Teachers supported it. So did the principal. Even the big guy showed up one day. He didn't read anything. Not yet. But he listened, and that meant something. The Quiet Teen's poem was printed and placed in every classroom. Underneath, a short note was added. Words can hurt, but they can also heal. Choose yours wisely. The Quiet Teen didn't become famous. He didn't win any awards, but he found something better. He found his place, and more importantly, he found peace, because he realized something powerful. He didn't need to fight to be heard. He just needed to speak, and when he did, the world listened. The days after the assembly felt different. Not because everything had suddenly become perfect, because it hadn't. But something had shifted. People were more aware. Teachers paid closer attention. Students talked more openly. And the Quiet Teen, who used to walk through the halls with his head down, now held it high. He wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He was just being himself. And that made all the difference. One morning, as he walked into school, a teacher stopped him at the Yao tour. "You've inspired something," she said with a smile. "We're starting a new student-led program called Voices Matter. You in?" He thought about it for a second. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I'm in." The idea was simple. Students would lead weekly sessions where anyone could come and share their story. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't forced. It was just a space to talk, to listen, to understand. They set up in an empty classroom after lunch, chairs in a circle, a small sign on the door, open ears, open hearts. At first only a few showed up. Some were curious, others were nervous. A couple came just to see what it was all about. But soon, word spread. More students started coming. Each week, some shared poems, some sang songs they'd written. One girl drew pictures that told her whole life without saying a word. Each session ended the same way, with applause, not loud or wild, but soft, respectful, real. The Quiet Teen didn't always speak. Sometimes he just sat and listened. But when he did, people leaned in because they knew his voice carried weight. The big guy didn't show up right away. Most days he still kept to himself, still hung out with his old group, still played football after school. But things weren't the same between them anymore. Sometimes during class, he'd catch the Quiet Teen's eye and give a small nod. Once, after a test, he passed over a pencil, without a word, small things, but meaningful. One afternoon after another Voices Matter session, the big guy finally stepped inside. No one said anything, they just moved a chair open for him. He sat down slowly, hands resting on his knees. For a long time he didn't say a word. Then, quietly, he spoke. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I've never really talked like this before." A few heads nodded. "That's okay," someone said. "None of us did at first." He looked around the room, then he began. "I used to think strength meant being tough, being the loudest, the strongest, the one everyone looked up to." He paused. "But I realize now that's not real strength." He looked at the Quiet Teen. "That day you stood up after I hit you? That took more guts than anything I've ever done." Silence filled the room. Then someone clapped softly. Others joined in. The big guy smiled slightly. It was the first time he looked like he belonged. As weeks passed, the Voices Matter group grew. More teachers offered support. The principal even helped get funding for supplies. Posters went up across campus. Students started bringing in art, music, stories, and even short films they made themselves. The school became a place where people could be seen and heard. Even the quietest voices found a home. The quiet teen started leading some of the sessions. He didn't plan what he was going to say. He just spoke from the heart. One day he shared something new. Before I used to think silence meant weakness, like if I didn't fight back, I was giving in. But I learned something. Silence can be powerful, so can words. So can standing up, not to fight, but to speak. That line stuck with everyone. Later that week, a teacher pulled him aside. "There's a youth leadership conference next month," she said. "They want young voices to speak. Would you consider applying?" He blinked. "Me?" he asked. She smiled. "You've already changed this school. Imagine what you could do outside of it." He didn't answer right away. But later that night he sat at his desk again, pen in hand, notebook open. He stared at the blank page. Then he started writing. By the time spring rolled around, the school had changed. Bullying didn't disappear completely. Nothing ever does. But people were more willing to call it out, to stand up for others, to say something when they saw something wrong. The Voices Matter group had grown so much. It now had its own club board, and the big guy, he was part of it, not just showing up once in a while. He was helping run meetings, sharing his thoughts, changing. He still wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that mattered. One afternoon near the end of the school year, the quiet teen got an email. He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the screen. Then he smiled. He had been accepted. The Youth Leadership Conference wanted him to speak. He read the message again, then closed his laptop, looked out the window, and breathed. Everything had started. With a punch, a moment of pain, but from that pain, something good had grown. He didn't forget what happened, but he also didn't let it define him. Instead, he used it to help others, to speak up, to rise. And now, the world beyond his school was finally listening too. The morning of the Youth Leadership Conference, the quiet teen stood in front of the mirror. He wore a clean shirt, his hair brushed back like he had practiced the night before. His hands were shaking a little, not because he was scared, but because it meant something. This wasn't just another school event. This was bigger. Much bigger. Outside, his mom waited by the car, holding a small gift bag. "For luck," she said with a smile. Inside was a notebook, blank pages waiting to be filled. "You never know what you might need to write," she added. He hugged her tight, then climbed into the car. They drove through the city, away from everything familiar, toward something new. When they arrived, the place was full. Students from different schools, teachers, speakers, reporters. It didn't look like much from the outside, a big hall with signs and banners. But inside, it buzzed with energy. Young voices, big ideas, hope. The quiet teen walked in, clutching his notes. He wasn't sure what to expect. Would people listen? Would they care? A few volunteers handed out schedules and name tags. He put his on without reading it too closely. Then someone called his name. He turned. A woman in a suit smiled at him. "You're speaking today, right?" He nodded. "Good. You're up after lunch." She pointed toward the main stage. He followed her eyes, and his heart skipped. That was where he'd be, in front of hundreds of people. He took a deep breath and told himself, "You've done this before." The day went by quickly. There were workshops, talks, small group discussions. Some kids spoke about mental health. Others shared stories of growing up in different cultures. One girl talked about how hard it was to make friends when she first moved to a new country. Another boy spoke about standing up to online hate. The quiet teen listened to every word. He realized something. They were all fighting their own battles, just like he had. Before he knew it, lunch was over. Time to get ready. He sat backstage listening as the host introduced the next speaker. "And now," the voice said, "a young person who used their voice not to shout, but to heal." There was a pause. He stood up, wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, took one more breath, and walked onto the stage. The room dimmed slightly. A spotlight landed on him. Hundreds of eyes turned his way. He stepped up to the microphone, looked out, and began. I used to think strength came from being loud, from pushing back, from not letting anyone see me hurt. He paused. But I learned something. His voice grew steadier. Strength can also come from silence, from choosing peace over anger, from speaking up, not to fight, but to understand. Murmurs of agreement passed through the crowd. He continued. I was once punched in the face, for no reason other than being different. Gasps. But instead of hitting back, I chose to speak. He looked down at his notes, then closed them. I wrote a poem, not to blame, not to shame, just to say what I felt. He looked up again, to say that I mattered. Silence, then applause. Soft at first, then louder. Standing. He stepped back from the mic, heart pounding. Someone ran up to hug him, others waved. Some held up phones recording. Later, a teacher approached him. That speech, she said. It's already going viral. He blinked. What? She showed him her phone. A clip of his talk had reached thousands within minutes. People were sharing it, commenting, saying things like, this is what real leadership looks like. Thank you for saying what so many feel but don't know how to share. Your voice matters. He didn't know what to say, so he just smiled and thanked her. Back at school, things kept changing. More students signed up for Voices Matter. New leaders stepped forward. Even teachers started using the program in class to teach empathy, communication, and respect. One student created a short film based on the Quiet Teen story. Another organized a poetry night in the cafeteria. The school wasn't perfect, but it was trying, and that made all the difference. The big guy kept showing up too. Started leading parts of the sessions, talking about his past, about how he used to think being strong meant being tough. Now he knew better. I used to push people down, he told a group one day. Now I want to lift them up. No one clapped loudly, they just listened, which meant more. One afternoon, after a long session, the two of them sat outside together, Quiet Teen and the big guy, side by side. Neither said much at first. Then the big guy broke the silence. I'm proud of you, he said. Seriously, the Quiet Teen looked at him. Thanks. I mean it, the big guy said. You changed this school, and me too. The Quiet Teen smiled. We both changed. The big guy nodded. I wouldn't have figured it out without you. They sat there for a while longer, watching the sunset. Not enemies anymore. Not even just classmates. Something more. Friends. Not the kind that play video games or hang out every weekend, but the kind that helped each other grow. That mattered as summer came. The Quiet Teen got an offer, a scholarship, for writing, for leadership, for being someone who made a difference. His parents cried. He tried not to, but he couldn't help it, because he knew how far he'd come, from silence to voice, from fear to courage, from pain to purpose. The school gym was packed with families, teachers, and students dressed in caps and gowns. Balloons floated near the ceiling. Cameras clicked nonstop. Parents wiped tears before the ceremony even started. It was a big day for everyone, but for one student, it meant something more. He stood backstage, adjusting his cap, holding a folded piece of paper in his hand. Not because he was nervous, but because what he was about to say mattered. When his name was called, the crowd clapped louder than usual. Some people stood, others waved signs they'd made just for him. He walked across the stage, shook the principal's hand, and received his diploma. Then, without a word, he stepped toward the microphone. The room fell silent. He looked out at the sea of faces, at his parents, at his teachers, at the big guy, sitting near the front row, giving him a thumbs up. He took a breath and began. I used to think silence meant weakness, he said. His voice was calm, clear, strong. I thought if I didn't fight back, I was giving in. that if I didn't speak up, no one would ever see me. He paused. But I learned something. The crowd leaned in. Silence can be powerful. So can words. So can standing up. Not to hit, but to heal. A few people nodded. I wasn't. Always heard here, he continued. There were days I felt invisible, moments when I wanted to disappear. He looked around the room, but I stayed. And I found my voice. And that voice helped change this place. A soft murmur spread through the audience. He went on. I want to thank the people who stood by me, who listened when I spoke, who gave others a chance to speak too. He looked directly at the big guy. And I want to thank the ones who changed. That line hung in the air for a moment, then slowly people started clapping. Not wild applause, just steady. Real. Meaningful. He smiled. This school isn't perfect, he said. But we're trying. And sometimes trying is enough. He lowered the paper, looked out one last time. And maybe that's all any of us can do. Try to understand. Try to grow. Try to lift each other up. He stepped back from the mic. The room exploded into cheers. Some stood, others hugged. His parents cried again. And the big guy? He clapped harder than anyone. Months passed. Summer turned into fall. The quiet teen left for college. He studied writing, leadership, social impact. He kept speaking. At events, on panels, in videos. People listened. Not because he shouted, but because he told the truth. About pain, about growth, about the power of choosing peace over anger. And somewhere, back at Lincoln High, things kept changing. The Voices Matter group was still going strong. New leaders stepped up. More students shared their stories. Even the big guy led a session once. He didn't read a poem, didn't sing a song, but he did something else. He apologized to someone he once hurt in front of a whole room. I used to think strength came from being tough, he said. Now I know. Strength comes from being honest. No one clapped right away. They just listened, which meant more. One afternoon during a school event, the big guy ran into the quiet teen's old teacher. She smiled when she saw him. You've come a long way, she said. He shrugged. Still got a ways to go. She nodded. That's what makes you real. They stood there for a moment. Then she asked, You ever talk to him? He shook his head. Not lately. She handed him a letter. He wrote this for you. He took it carefully. Tore open the envelope, read the words inside. Hey, just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You didn't have to change. But you did. Keep lifting people up. Your voice matters too. Signed with a small sketch of a pen and a raised fist. He stared at it for a while, then looked back at her. Thanks, he said quietly. No problem, she said. He always believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. He smiled. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged. Not just in school, not just in a group, but in the world. Back home, the quiet teen sat at his desk. Was in a new city now. New school. New life. But some things never changed. He still carried a notebook, still wrote late at night, still believed in the power of words. He opened a fresh page, wrote at the top, The Voice That Grows. Then began, we all start somewhere, some loud, some quiet, some sure of where we're going, others not so much. But the important thing isn't how we start, it's how we keep going. He stopped there, closed the notebook, looked out the window, thought about everything, from silence to voice, from fear to courage, from pain to purpose. He smiled, because he knew something now, something he wished he'd known sooner. He didn't need to fight to be seen, he just needed to speak. And when he did, the world listened.